I am a gigantic Resident Evil fan. I mean, look at my arm. I have a giant Resident Evil Village tattoo. I love this series to bits. So understand what it means when I say that Resident Evil 4, the original, is my second least favorite game in the franchise. The setting is good, and I like the story okay, but the fact that half the game is an escort mission, combined with the fact that they put tank controls in a heavy action game, is just made me not like it as much. Keep in mind, I am saying that it is one of the worst games in a franchise made out of gold. A shit-covered nugget is still a gold nugget. Flash forward to 2023, and they have remade the game from the ground up using the RE engine and updating everything about the game from the visuals to the controls and, welcome to my top 3, Resi 4. Now, that is not to say the game is for everyone, or even this version. I am fully aware that RE4 is the favorite Resident Evil game for a staggering amount of fans. So much so that I feel the need to justify my dislike for the original. However, the few things the original did that drug it down so far for me have not only been resolved, but they fixed things I didn't even know I wanted fixed. All of that said, from here on I'll be talking about Resident Evil 4 as a singular entity and not a remake. I'm not going to compare it to the original because if I do that then this will be an extremely lopsided review. From the top, graphics. The game is beautiful. RE Engine has been one of the best things Capcom has put out. It makes for beautiful scenery, god-tier texturing, facial expressions, modeling, the way the wind blows through the trees and blows the strings hanging over canyons, the way the cloth flaps when you walk through it, the smoothness of the merchant when he opens his cloak, even the follow-through on Leon's movements when he catches Ashley or jumps through a window. This game looks great, and most importantly, it plays great. This is one of the best optimized games I've ever installed on my computer. I just turned it on and I was off to the races. It automatically detected the correct settings it needed to be at to both look as good as possible in my setup with very few hiccups in terms of gameplay. I think I had one slowdown the entire game, and that was probably my fault for not having restarted my computer before I started playing. Given the amount of things that can happen on screen at once, this is incredible. Somehow everything is moving in real time with the weather, and there are 15 enemies in an area holding and throwing various items, explosive barrels, destructive environments, enemy drops. It is ridiculous how well this game runs on my pre-built PC with an RTX 3060. The lighting is also something worthy of mentioning. Dark areas are bright enough to see in without taking away the atmosphere. The way fire and torches light areas, lanterns, sunlight, I cannot emphasize enough that this game is beautiful. It also sounds great. There's not a ton of music, but when it does pick up, you know it's going down, and it's pretty intense. The music does a great job of adding to the atmosphere no matter where you are or what you're doing. From the panic of dodging catapults raining hellfire down your path to the relief you feel when you hear that merchant theme after narrowly surviving a harrowing encounter that drained you dry of ammo, everything always sounds like it should. Even the dead silence when walking through the abandoned village after the initial survival event sounds great in its ambiance. Voices also come through wonderfully. If you are wearing headphones, then you will not only know which direction an enemy is approaching from, but you'll even know approximately how far and if there's a wall between you. Voice acting for Leon and company is a bit cheesy, but Resident Evil has always been a campy B-movie disguised as a AAA game, and that's why we love it. Ada also sounds strange, but in a good way. The way she talks make it feels like her VO was meant for another game, with her buttery smooth, no-nonsense delivery being in stark contrast to the one-liners of Leon S. Kennedy and his pals. The one downside in the audio department is the locals have very few dialogue options, and you notice it really quickly if you're scouting out a potential battle arena to get a feel for it before initiating the encounter. The gameplay is super crispy. Mostly. The controls honestly take a moment to get used to. Initially, I prefer the mobility of the controller, but it didn't take long for me to get used to the stiffness of the mouse and keyboard. I said I wasn't going to do this, but it's important. You see, in the original Resident Evil 4, you couldn't move and shoot. Once you readied your gun, you controlled the tip of the gun when moving the left stick, contrary to every conventional aiming scheme available at the time. It was hard to get used to and never worked great, especially combined with the laser sight rather than a targeting reticle. I've heard people say that the laser sight's more realistic, but we're talking about a game series that has vampires and literally Beelzebub. I'm not going to sweat the realism over controls. The remake, however, takes up a more traditional setup of holding the trigger down and allowing you to continue to move to some degree with the left stick, but moving and aiming the gun with the right stick with a controller. Now, of course, this all goes out the window when you're on a mouse and keyboard, but it's very important to understand how much better the controls are, especially as a veteran gamer. If you're new to gaming, the controls of the original game might not bother you that much. But when you have years or even decades of right-stick aiming ingrained in your muscle memory, the RE4 control scheme is just artificial difficulty in the same way as getting over it with Bennett Foddy. And the remake is not perfect. You can shoot Ashley in certain situations, which causes a game over. However, when those conditions are not met, you cannot. There is a proximity that Ashley can get into where she will actually cause Leon to freak out if you're trying to aim and make your attempts to aim impossible as he jiggles his gun up and down, desperately wanting to defend himself from villagers staggering towards you, but Ashley's close proximity, it brings out the pacifist in him. It is particularly bad on ground inclines or staircases. It's not perfect and reinforces that action games should not double as escort missions, but the improvements far outweigh that one-off jank. The action scenes also feel way better. RE4 started this survival wave style gameplay that the series has used since, where it's a survival game and you want to conserve ammo, but the game won't let you be too good at it. Now and then you get trapped in an arena and are forced to fight through waves and waves of enemies until a timer or objective is met, or you just kill everything in the area. These areas will absolutely drain you dry on resources, and that is what they are designed to do. It's like what they do with Samus in the Metroid games, but instead of once per game, it's once every hour or two. You'll be sitting pretty wondering what to do with all this ammo you've stockpiled, then suddenly you're smashing every crate desperately hoping for even a single handgun bullet. This makes the game reset its intensity every little bit, and it's honestly genius, and one of the strongest points of the game. There's also jump scares here and there just to keep things spicy, but for the most part RE4 focuses on the atmosphere and the threat being the gameplay, not whether or not there's a man hiding in that cabinet, which makes it so when there is a man hiding in the cabinet, you crap your pants. My biggest complaint with the gunplay, besides the thing I mentioned with Ashley, is in the cabin scene where you fight alongside Luis and he tries to give you ammo. There's an animation to catch it, and I don't know if it's even possible to accept ammo without getting slapped by a goober with a scythe. There's also the emphasis on knives in this game, which they continue to evolve in these remakes. You can use the knife to parry, defend, and attack with, but it uses durability based on what action you're performing. You are always relieved to find a kitchen knife laying around, and while the knife is useful for many encounters, you'll sometimes find yourself dry on them. Luckily, the merchant can not only repair your primary knife, which is the combat knife given to Leon by Marvin in Resident Evil 2 Remake, but upgrade its power and durability. In fact, the merchant can upgrade a lot of your gear, and that is another incredibly strong point of Resident Evil 4 across all versions. There are many different weapons and guns to choose from, with varying accuracy, power, penetration, etc. The game is very much about choosing the loadout that's best for you while keeping enough inventory space to hold all of your sweet loot, then spending your hard-earned in-game cash to upgrade them past the point of sanity or logic. In addition, there are attachments for different guns that can improve different aspects, most of which are obtained from spindles that you acquire by completing side quests from the merchant. The best way to acquire cold hard cash, however, is treasure. Treasures are sprinkled throughout the world and are by far one of the most rewarding things any Resident Evil game has ever offered. Not only can you make a mental note of locked boxes and doors that you can likely access later in the game to return to, but they give a tangible amount of cash for doing so. In addition to loot you straight up sell, there's slotted treasure that you can stick gems into, increasing their value. Going one step further, there are multiple colors and shapes of the gems, and you get multipliers based on what gems you put into them. A chalice with 3 red gems in it is worth more than a chalice with 2 red gems and 1 blue gem, for instance. This push and pull of waiting until you can get the biggest multiplier possible without permanently missing out on something that the merchant may not be selling next chapter adds another layer of strategizing and patience to the game. Do you just slot the red gem into that necklace now and upgrade your gun, or do you hold out for some yellow gems? Your choice, stranger. The other big thing to talk about is the boss fights. Generally, the game locks you in some sort of arena setting and forces you to 1v1 final destination. I desperately do not want to spoil these fights, especially if you haven't played or watched the original, but they're usually gigantic and very intense. They also have a lot of cool, unique animations Leon can do to get in some critical damage while the boss is staggered. And once you power through the 18 to 20 hours or so of gameplay, with hardcore and deaths included, even more content opens up, because now the game isn't survival, nor is it horror. You know the game inside and out, right? It's time to tackle the additional content. An even harder difficulty opens up that you can carry over your items and stuff into. The game is fine as a one and done, but modern Resident Evil games play so well that you may still have an appetite for destruction. There are so many ways to extend your enjoyment of the games that what once was an 11-hour experience can now become 20, 30, or 40 hours if you love the game enough. Hell, I've put nearly 50 in the Village, and I'll likely go back for more at some point. Resident Evil 4 Remake is a marked improvement across the board from its original counterpart. While it's not flawless, it fixes all the issues with the original game while adding in some great quality of life improvements and manages to maintain the difficulty without falling back on poor controls. Much like the RE2 remake, it stands out as one of the best games in the franchise. I cannot help but be just as excited about the prospects of a remake of Resident Evil 5 and 6 in the RE engine as I am about Resident Evil 9 whenever that happens. If you like survival horror, solid gunplay, or just want a good time and can handle some amount of body horror, then this game's for you. Not just that, but there's a lot of post-game content to help stretch out that $60 price tag. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. It really helps out the channel a bunch and it lets me get out more reviews. Maybe someday I'll get noticed and maybe I can get some review copies so reviews come out at a reasonable time. Until then, deuces dummies.